Now, in regards
So now the Christians are disagreeing. Wow.
he might have, he says slightly,
Wait, he disagrees, so you should respect that.
That's fine. Christians, we discuss debate, no
Yeah,
problem.
go on.
Now, going to the two families of arguments you are advancing.
Yeah.
Jesus saying, He is my only true God. Scriptures makes it quite clear. What I'd suggest to you is a very simple thing, which is I'd ask you to explore in the New Testament, and there are references in the New Testament about how the Father calls Jesus. I'd like you to explore that when you go home. You are sticking on to only the way the Son calls the Father. Of course I agree and I appreciate the Son called the Father His God. I appreciate that. But Scriptures, New Testament equally is also clear that the Father Himself calls the Son as God. Very important, not just as God, as my God. That's a reference in the New Testament, which is a homework for you to explore.
Which verse? Was the reference?
I'd like you to read.
I've seen it before, but if you give the reference for the audience, if you don't mind.
I'd like you to find out and read, please.
Oh, really?
It won't be hard for you.
I know it already.
At the least, you could stumble upon a few different verses when you do that. So the point isn't when Jesus says He is my God, it does not negate the fact that the Father calls Jesus my God. Very important. So now in regards to Trinity, my brother very correctly said that I'm not supposed to use the term Trinity, and I don't agree with him on that. But let's say the matter of our discussion is not on the term Trinity, but on the idea of three persons in one God. That is what we are talking about, and I'm sure we understand that. So it's not about the term Trinity. Of course, Trinity and anything else which we are quoting right now is in English. And of course, we are talking about New Testament, which was written in Greek, and most likely was communicated in Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, and so on.
The term which God used.
Coming.
I just want to add to that. The term which God used. I'm no expert when it comes to Hebrew, but the term which God used when He said, "Let us make man in our image," it was I think it's called a pluralistic masculine term. It's a God says God was talking to somebody. He said, "Let us make man in our image." So there was somebody there with God. Let us do it together.
Sir, if you don't know Hebrew, I suggest you don't mention that, because they will laugh at you. I know the grammar of that, what you just quoted, as a we.
No one would laugh at the point you made.
The
point is very valid.
If you don't know something, it's best not to speak about it.
You said you don't know Hebrew and mentioned
you
something.
think you know,
that's a pronunciation.
but you're doing the same thing. The irony of it, you're coming from the New Testament, but you're cherry picking.
Why are you all triggered? Calm down.
You think you know Christianity?
Why are you triggered?
You don't know nothing about Christianity.
Calm down.
Arguments.
I'll take you on next, don't
You
worry.
believe this portion, but you don't believe what Jesus said, the Son of God.
It's to expose you guys.
That's hypocrisy.
No wonder you're triggered.
That's cherry picking.
No wonder you're triggered.
Two families
Go on,
of
go on.
arguments. If the first family of argument, which I'd like to
You
go,
know, this is...
Sorry, go ahead.
two families of arguments. The first family is Jesus in the New Testament. There are multiple very important points which we haven't spoken about so far in Hyde Park, as far as I know, which make the point that Jesus is claiming equality with the Father blatantly, demonstrably clear,
Well, speak then.
especially in the eyes of the first century Jews.
Now is a
I'd
chance.
like to just
Think about
give
it.
two examples
Go
for
on.
them, just two examples.
Okay.
There are plenty more which I reserve for a very dedicated conversation about Trinity itself for later. Just two as a flavor. Point number one. When on the day of the final judicial process, when the chief priest asked Jesus to tell plainly, and he said this, Hashim, he said this to Jesus, he said, "Tell us plainly, are you the Christ, the Son of the living God?" That was the confession the high priest, the first century religious leader, wanted Jesus to make, if that was true. Jesus said, "Yes, it is as you say." The moment he mentioned that, unlike a 21st century Muslim,
Or a Jew.
the high priest did not, maybe a Jew, the high priest did not go around saying, "Oh, let's leave him alone. He is merely claiming to be a son. We know even Adam was a son, so no problem at all." That's not what the first century Jewish religious top-notch high priest said. He rather said blasphemy. In other words, very, very unlike the interpretation of people like you and many other Muslims and Jews, some of them at least, in the 21st century, the first century high priest has a completely different interpretation of Jesus' claim that he was the Son of the living God. According to the first century Jew, that is claiming equality with the Father. Very blatant, very demonstrable. I don't want you to nod your head anywhere around there. I don't want your opinions on this. I'd like to rely upon the first century Jewish top-notch religious leaders' comment on this. And this is precisely why the Bible says Jews at few different points in time, when Jesus referred to the one in heaven as his Father, immediately did not say, oh, he is just claiming to be a son. We know Adam was a son, we know David was a son, and therefore no problem. That's not what they said. They immediately picked up stones to stone him to death. That's just one flavor. For Jesus blatantly claiming equality with the Father in the eyes not of you. I don't care what you think. I don't care. No, I'm not saying you said something. I'm just telling you, I don't care what your opinions are about this. I'm just going by the first century Jewish religious interpretation of that particular statement. That's point number one. Just to give you a flavor.
Okay.
Another very important flavor. In the Old Testament, Joseph became a big shot because he began interpreting dreams. The most crucial interpretation of Joseph, which made him a huge guy, was the interpretation of the dream of the Pharaoh of that time. This is what happened. After Joseph interpreted the dream, the Pharaoh said, you are just like me in my kingdom. You are just like me, equal to me in everything. In everything. Apart from one thing. Apart from one thing, in everything you are equal to me. And just to remind you that one thing in which the Pharaoh was higher than Joseph, and that was the throne. So it is common understanding when people say, you are equal to me even on the throne, that what is claimed there is complete equality, holistic equality. And by equality, I'm not talking about uniformity. And that is a crucial point the brother raised. I appreciate and agree that the Son is a distinct person, like the Father. I'm not claiming they are uniform. They're just the same. Is not my claim. My claim rather is they are equal. It's pretty much like if I had 10-pound note in one of my hands, 2 5-pound notes in another of my hands, they both are equal in the value of what they are supposed to represent. Equal. That's what I'm talking about. And the throne is supposed to be the ultimate determinant of equality. But what did Jesus say in the New Testament? Jesus said, just like how I sat on my Father's throne, just like how I sat on my Father's throne, I will make you guys sit on my throne. Jesus has his own throne also, but he has
no space.
But he has the allowance or the authority to sit on the Father's throne also. What is supposed to be the ultimate determinant of equality in terms of the throne? Jesus claims very openly that he is equal to the Father even in terms of the throne. These are just two very important things to give you a flavor of equality. Trinity, like I said, we have tens of similar arguments. There are families of arguments I can advance right from the New Testament, even not going into the Old Testament. Right from the New Testament, many times right from the mouth of Jesus himself, to establish that Jesus was blatantly claiming equality, demonstrably claiming equality with the Father, not uniformity, but equality, but only to the informed. You, as a Muslim in the 21st century, might miss this point, which obviously has happened, but I don't want you to repeat some of these points again, at least after hearing them today. These are points demonstrably true in the New Testament. That is to address the first area. Jesus in the New Testament claiming equality with the Father. Messiah being equal to the Father in the Old Testament is also demonstrably true. The beginning of which was the point my brother raised. Maybe 5-10 minutes ago, which is in regards to that name Elohim. Elohim is demonstrably a plural word, which some of you, I think was that Muhammad, I think was his name, who in one of the debates he had, conveniently ignored, gave his own interpretation of this and that and whatnot, claimed that was supposed to be plural of respect and all sorts of weird things which are completely incorrect when you read the passage in simple words very carefully. Elohim, the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, is demonstrably, quite consistently, thoroughly a composite being, not a unit, not a simple unity like the way you claim, regarding which you use the term Unitarian. That is blatantly incorrect. Demonstrably true fact concerning the Old Testament, we find this at multiple points in time. Multiple points in time. There was even a person who showed up on the face of the earth who had the same name as the Father in heaven. The same name was given to a person who showed up. I won't tell you who, yet I want you to do the homework. There was someone who showed up to the nation of Israel with the same name as of the Father in heaven. Same name, Yahweh, to the one who showed up to the nation of Israel. Similarly, you have Abraham meeting men who are multiple in number. And again, there are some nitty-gritty there, but we'll deal with that. You have this pattern repeating over and over again. Isaiah chapter 48, I believe, is where the Messiah, when he speaks, when you read chapters, I believe 45 onward, going up to 48, 49, what you would see is that who was the first person in the passage was clearly Yahweh God. But then what you would find, especially when you arrive at chapter 49, was that person, even though he is clearly Yahweh God, was Messiah, who would show up in the matrix of a woman on the face of the earth. So again, demonstrably, Messiah being equal, of the same name Yahweh, and Yahweh being a composite being, not a simple being, like the way what you mentioned about earlier. Just to remind you one particular quote my brother mentioned earlier, Yahweh said, "Let us make man." Makes perfect sense in the context of knowing a composite being as the eternal God. Allah of the Quran saying, He just said be, and then things came into being, does not make any sense if there was no one to listen to Him. Not even the light which He was going to create. When there was nothing, and when He was trying to create, He can't speak to anyone. And the moment He speaks to someone, I think He's getting it completely wrong. That's illogical. But when the God of the Bible says, "Let us make man in our image, let there be light," there was audience to His conversation. Very logical, very good, sensible conversations. That's what you find in the Old Testament also. That is the second family of argument. Composite being, Messiah being equal to the Father, can be established through the Old Testament or through the New Testament or through both. Very important points.
Okay. Yeah. Make sure you keep the time. With regards to your last point, that Allah, in order to create something, He has to say kun fayakun, otherwise He can't create. I think that is only comes from ignorance on your part. I don't blame you, because most of the knowledge many Christians have about Islam is from hearsay. Allah doesn't need or require or depend on any being, okay, to hear Him, to say what He wants, to do what He wants. He's independent Unlike Jesus, who says, I can of myself do nothing. As I hear, I obey. And this is what Jesus says in John 5:30 very clearly. So you see, Allah is not dependent on it. I didn't say that's what he said. That's in the Bible. I didn't say that's what he said. He said that Allah needs to say kun fayakun. He doesn't need to. That's fine. That's fine. I'm answering the way I want, not the way you want. Okay. Sorry to. It's okay. So with regards to that, with regards to your ignorance, I can understand, because many Christians come from a hearsay with regards to the teachings of Islam. Now going back to the very first point you made, that God. Okay, leave him. He has a habit of speaking in the middle. Now what I'm saying is this: with regards to the Father calling Jesus God, yes, I will also tell you in the Bible, the devil is himself called the God of the earth. He's called the Lord of the earth. That doesn't make him God. Just because the term God is used for someone, that doesn't automatically mean that that person or that individual is the Almighty God. Now look at the difference between that passage which you alluded to, where God the Father calls Jesus God, yes, and Jesus calling the Father the only true God. You see, in fact, there are many theos in the Bible. There's Baal, there's the Satan, there is all these other people. They're all called gods. They're called God as well. In fact, if you read Psalms 82:6, which Jesus alludes to in John 10:34, yes, in John 10:34, he's saying they were called gods. And all I'm saying is, I am the Son of God. Yes, I'm paraphrasing again. Now, you said that Jesus, when he says Jesus claimed equality with God, and the Jewish rabbi, Jewish high priest agreed with that he was blaspheming. In fact, what you're saying is you're taking the testimony of a Jewish high priest instead of taking the testimony of Jesus Christ. I, as a Muslim, would put more weight on the testimony of Jesus Christ than some Jewish high priest who wanted to label him as a hypocrite and as someone who's a blasphemer. In fact, that is exactly what they wanted to do to Jesus Christ. They wanted him to be put to death, and they will invent 101 excuses to do that. So if you want to stick to the Jewish high priest's testimony, that's entirely up to you as a Christian in the 21st century. But I, as a Muslim in the 21st century, would rather believe what Jesus said with regards to when Jesus said in John 10:30, I and the Father are one. Yes, this is exactly what the Jews at that time thought. They thought, just like you, that Jesus is claiming equality with the Father. However, Jesus responds to that allegation. The allegation against him at that time was in John 10:30, the allegation was the same thing. That Jews are saying that you, being a mere man, are claiming to be God, when Jesus said, I and the Father are one. So there you go. Jesus then pointed to Psalms 82:6, where he says, they are called gods. Who are called gods? The Jewish judges. The elders are called gods by God himself. Does that mean those elders are gods? No, they are not.
Son of God.
You really have to you only have to put the context in place, my friend. That is the point you're missing. When Jesus says the only true God is the Father, is a big difference to saying that he is God or that person is God. The term God is used very loosely in the Old Testament and the New Testament. But the main important thing is the context. The context is clear. No one says you're the only true God except for the Father in the Bible. And that we know very clearly, that the Jews themselves to this day, they believe that the only true God is the Father. They call him Abba. This is a Jewish terminology to call Abba the Father. And this Father is Jesus' God. The question here is this: if you're claiming the Father as a God and Jesus as a God, then they are each other's gods. That is the most absurd thing I've heard from a person who believes that there is only one God. If there is only one God, according to Jesus Christ, when he was a human being, I'm sure he wasn't an atheist. He wasn't an agnostic. He was a believer in God. Whom did he worship? He worshipped the Father. He fell on his face in the Garden of Gethsemane when he wanted his prayer to be heard. Who falls on the face in the prayers today? The Muslims, alhamdulillah. I wouldn't see a Christian here, maybe some churches do, but most of the churches that we know, the Christians do not even remove the shoes in the church, let alone fall on the faces in the church. Okay? So there we go. The other thing you mentioned is about the equality. If Jesus was indeed equal to God, then why don't you explain to us when Jesus was addressed as my good master? He says there is no one good. except God. If he was God, then why did he need to object to that? A very simple statement of being called good master. He refuses to even be called in equality to God the Father as being good. Yes, so he objects to that. He says there is only one good, and that is God. He didn't say that is me. He said that is God. His God. Who is his God? His Father. Who is the Father? The Almighty God, and not some false God. You mentioned, and he mentioned, he alluded to, that's when somebody says, when God says, let us create man in our image. Yes? This is some sort of a complex plurality, or some sort of a composite plurality here. Yes? This is not plurality, my friend. This is the terminology of the Jewish people. In fact, you know who else was called Elohim? Moses was called Elohim to the Pharaoh. Go home and do your homework this time. And I'm even giving you the reference like you. It's in Exodus chapter 7, the very first verse. You are Elohim to the Pharaoh. Are you guys going to tell me Moses is a plural person? Or is he one person? Go figure it out, my friend. So next time, if you don't know Hebrew, please do not quote Hebrew terminology and the language, because in Hebrew, the singularity and the plurality is determined by the context, and in this case, by the verb.
Yeah, and if you don't understand Christianity, don't quote from the New Testament.
Well, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong when Jesus says the only true God is the Father.
Jesus, he's quoting Jesus.
Well, I do believe in Jesus. I have to.
Jesus said many times he's the Son of God.
Well, Son of God. Many people say Son of God. Abraham is called Son of God.
No,
David is called Son of God. Abraham is called Son of God. Many sons of God in the Bible. I will finish yet. All right, 45 minutes, right? I got 15 more. Don't you worry. If you're going to elongate your talk, I will do the same. And then you go on saying about the equality. There is no equality between Jesus and the Father. That is for sure. For example, Jesus, when he was asked about the last hour, what did he say? No one knows the hour. Not the angels in heaven. Not the Son himself. And the only one who knows is the Father. He's the only one who knows the last hour, which shows that Jesus is ignorant of his even second coming.